So let's go down the line. You guys heard my story. Hey, John, good to see you. Let's go down the line, and I'll have the panelists introduce themselves. In the interest of time, I won't read the bios, but what are your priorities for being here today first? And then we'll go through some questions. Does that sound good?
Sounds good.
All right, great. You're up, Tracy.
Okay, my name is Tracy Slepcevic. I am a board-certified integrative health practitioner, and I am also the founder of Autism Health and the Autism Health Summit. My goal and what it is that I look to achieve is to educate all parents on how to address those underlying conditions associated with autism and other neurological disorders, what they can do in preventive care, but also on the research side, what types of treatments and therapies that are out there that are working for kids, how to get, independent studies done so that we know that these therapies are working effectively.
Thank you so much. And she is so good at it. Tell us about your annual conference, please.
So once a year in April, we do an annual conference, the Autism Health Summit. So we're probably the only autism conference out there that doesn't follow the narrative. We speak very openly. A lot of these amazing doctors and scientists that are here today, including the one to my right, have spoken at the conference. It will be in San Diego, April 24th, 25th, and 26th of next year. We look forward to everybody attending. And it really is about, I'm a solutions girl. So I'm all about people having answers as to their questions, as to what's caused what, and what they can do to address those issues.
It's a high energy conference, and once you go, you walk away. If you've never been to one, you walk away with a community of friends that you can talk to for the rest of your life. You do a great job. All right, so Mary Coyle, it's my honor to introduce Mary Coyle. Would you tell us a little bit about yourself and your priorities for being here today?
Thank you for having me. Yes, my name's Mary Coyle, and I have a child that's on the spectrum. He's 34 years old. I have a lot of friends in the audience here. We did homotoxicology with him, and so I'd like to explain that a little further in addition to bioregulatory medicine that I'd like to teach other parents.
Thank you very much, and thank you all for your patience with me not reading your bios and appreciating that we'd rather hear from you than about you, okay? Dr. John Gatanis, I don't know what happened. I started studying autism in 2014, and I didn't meet you until this year. And let's just say, I'm going to give you a commendation that was passed on to me. You should be in charge of a research program on autism within the NIH, sir. So go ahead. And now I've managed your expectations just right. Go ahead.
That's very kind. Yes, I'm John Gaetanis. I'm a child neurologist, and boy, in terms of the priorities or what I wanted to speak on today, I think there's a million things I think that are important to convey. But I want to first thank the fact that we're here today to have discourse, to have conversation. And as a physician, we don't often have that opportunity because we exist within a culture that has been so narrowly focused on one storyline that is becoming harder and harder to continue to maintain. And my hope really is that those walls start to break down and that we can actually begin to not just improve the lives of kids who have been diagnosed, but really think about prevention. And that's one thing that has arisen in this conference, but it's just not part of the discourse outside of here, is that there may be a pathway towards prevention and how incredibly powerful that would be.
Thank you, John. Thank you. Dr. Fry, before you start, I believe you will recall the day that I said that I thought that you should be the director of NIH.
Yes, you did say that. Yeah.
Yes, I did. And I'm happy with the director that we have right now, but I still think that he should be one of these days the director of NIH. We really need to take over the entire institution with a focus
just move
on
it to
autism.
Phoenix. Yeah, we have a lot of room out there, and we can remake it.
Yeah, absolutely. So you've spoken a couple of times today. What's your priorities for this panel?
Well, I definitely think that my priorities is that I think we have to talk about research that helps individuals, as I was saying before. It touches them, it improves their lives, and stop, perseverating on these very, minute mechanisms that makes good science and is very interesting, but doesn't help anybody along the way. And of course, as John said, prevention. We can prevent this, and that's the only way we're going to get ahead of it, and we're going to make headway. And John was my senior resident in a neurology residency, so everything I know was from him.
Amazing. So Dr. Fry's also a great mentor. What a great career you contributed to. So it's my honor to start the question session. With all your ears perked up, you're about to learn, and I am too. I always learn when I talk with these guys. Tracy, how can early interventions that focus on gut health and nutrition be prioritized in autism care, and what evidence supports dietary cleanup as a first step in preventing downstream neurological and behavioral changes?
So I'm sure many of you will agree with me when I say that addressing gut issues should be the first step to autism care. And because the gut is not just for digestion, it is home to 70 to 80% of the immune system and production of neurotransmitters such as serotonin, dopamine, GABA. So if your gut is messed up, then most likely your brain and your immune system are in a constant state of stress. So what do? So as parents, it used to be called the autism diet. Does anybody remember back in the Dan days, everyone used to be like, oh, well, they call it the autism diet. So removing inflammatory foods, getting rid of gluten, dairy, casein, soy, food dyes, and preservatives from our diet. So I'm here to tell you, if it's not real food, you shouldn't be eating it, and neither should your children. And as a parent, I've had so many parents come to me and look for other options. So I'm here to tell you that the first option should be to clean the gut, because other treatments and therapies are going to be less effective and not work, whether it be traditional therapies or biomedical, unless you start with the gut. And the gut is very important. There is no way around it. There's only through, and there's no doing it half-time, part-time, whatever. And there's been lots of research and evidence that a lot of these kids with ASD have dysbiosis. They have leaky gut, they have yeast, they have pathogens. So all these different things. And if your child has ever taken antibiotics, and my kid was an ear infection baby, so it was really sad when the pediatrician's office called my kid the mascot of their office, because he was there every month with an ear infection. So you can imagine how much yeast was in his gut. So yeast competes with the body in regards to vitamins and nutrients. So when it coats the lining of the gut, it inhibits the body's ability to absorb all those vitamins and nutrients, so these kids become nutrient deficient. So I'm here to say, first and foremost, and I can tell you there are many, many success stories, probably a lot in this room right here, but for my own success story, for my son, the number one thing, other than truly believing that he would live a normal life, was to clean out his gut, and then he began to speak again, and I got more eye contact, more functionality, because his brain wasn't inflamed. So those of you who don't know, but the gut is connected to the brain via the nervous system. So if your gut's inflamed, the brain's inflamed. So we need to address the gut first.
Thank you so much. Yeah, the microbiome aspect of autism health was something that I ran into when I read those 2,000 studies for my book, and realized that aluminum and mercury are actually excreted through the intestine, and so those toxins are not good for your microbiome. They can impair and kill the microbiome off and alter it. I wanted to mention someone who was supposed to be here with us today. His name Dr. Christian Bogner. He has kind of some miracle kids that are walking away from microbiome treatment talking for the first time.
Yes.
After getting rid of one of the microbiome species that produces cyanide. I didn't know this. and it impairs motor neuron function. And so that's a wonderful thing. That should be a headline on the page at NIH. We need to see funding to actually, see what percentage of kids need this therapy, right?
Absolutely.
All right, so we'll do it a little bit different this time. By the way, if anybody wants to comment on a short follow-up, keep it brief, but please do after one of the answers. Mary, thank you for being here. We talked a bit before the conference, and I'm really fascinated. One of the things you told me that you wanted to make sure people understood was the differences between homeopathy and homotoxicology. Could you start there for us?
So homeopathy was developed by Dr. Hahnemann. I'm sure everybody in the room is familiar with homeopathy. Back at the the end of the 17th century. It's one potency and one constituent in each remedy. And there's three principles that homeopathic remedies are made by. One is the principle of like cures like. So if you have a runny nose or if you have red eyes, the homeopath might suggest red onion or allium cepa. So you're going like cures like to stimulate that same reaction in your body. The second principle is the law of infinitesimal. So we use tiny, tiny, even micro or nano amounts of the original tincture, like arnica or belladonna. And then the law, or the principle, of succussion, where with each serial dilution, the remedy is rigorously shaken. With homotoxicology, homo is human, toxico, toxin, and ology is science. So it's the study of the science of toxins on humans. I was in the chemical industry at the time, and I'm probably the poster mother of what you shouldn't do if you are pregnant. So I was on construction sites, I was exposed to a lot of lead dust. So when my son was diagnosed at 2 with ASD, I knew that it was probably something that happened pretty closely in utero, transgenerational toxins. So when I heard about homotoxicology from a pharmacist in Florida named Dr. Kratz, he worked at the Merck Manual. It was, he's very mainstream, but he was sick himself, so he wanted to find homeopathic complex remedies, which have a lot of different constituents in it and a lot of different potencies in it to help trigger the body, alert the body that toxins are in there. So you're kind of working off the model of homeopathy, like cures like, to allow the body to know that mercury's in there, aluminum's in there, heavy metals in there. So I was all over that. So I called him up and we started using that protocol, and he started doing really, really well. And we had done the diet and all the other things that help bring the inflammation down, but it wasn't enough for him. I mean, I think the toxins went intracellular, and we actually had to get these toxins out. And then everything on the biochemical level, the things that these two brilliant doctors are doing, started working, because the B12 was making him really hyper, and I could see he couldn't even break down his food, let alone the 50 supplements that I was giving him. All of a sudden his language started to explode when he started taking methyl B12 shots. And we started putting in SAMe and the folinic acid. So it was just kind of that, getting that grease off the wall so that everything subsequently started to stick. And then from his progress, then other parents started calling me up, and so that's when I started teaching them about it.
That sounds like a rather intelligent approach towards treating kids with autism, to make sure they're ready for other therapies first. And no pediatrician knows anything about this. And so let me ask this as a quick follow-up. You've seen kids that things, protocols have been tried on them for years, and parents have struggled for years trying to help them have better days. And your approach with bioenergetics and homeotoxicology helped them over the hump. Can you tell us, about how many times you've seen this? Just raw numbers. Like,
I've been doing this for 30 years, so
yeah.
I've worked with lots of, talked and taught lots of parents, and we do work together as a team. I'm more of a teacher than anything else. But I don't really advertise. I don't.
Yep.
And it's all word of mouth, and
Yep.
the kids are the best advertisements. So they'll say, I saw this kid at school and he did this, or I want to know what you're doing.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for that. So we're bouncing around from topic to topic, so keep your eyes and ears perked here. We'll go to Dr. John Gatanis. I'm just going to mix the questions that Richard Fry sent. So about how many children with autism have insufficient folate in the brain? Why does this happen, and what is the treatment?
Wow, this is Richard's question.
You better get it right.
You didn't know there was going to be an oral exam from your mentor.
Oh, wow, thanks for that.
Should have studied.
Yeah, I know. I should have studied. You set me up. Yeah, so in terms of how frequently we see this, let me start first with the testing and why this happens. So for, one of the major contributors to cerebral folate deficiency are folate receptor antibodies, or what we call FRAT. So the folate receptor antibodies block folate, which is B9, from getting into the brain. So B9 has to actually be transported actively into the brain through a transporter. It's not something that just passively diffuses through. If you have antibodies blocking that transporter, then your brain and spinal fluid are deficient. Obviously, it's a little hard to just do a spinal tap, so checking for those antibodies would be an important way to assess this, but in truth, you have to sometimes consider that it's an out-of-pocket test, like so many of the things that we often have to do to really treat our kids well. And not all families can afford that. So sometimes it also demands simply doing an empiric trial, starting, and again, keep in mind, this is vitamin B9. Okay, so I'll just add one piece here, though, to think about this. So we're talking about a treatment that's a vitamin-based treatment using folinic acid. Folinic acid tends to bypass that transporter, and yet we're getting a lot of resistance from our colleagues about this idea, and I've read a lot of press saying, well, we have insufficient evidence for using folinic acid. It's worth noting there have been 4 randomized double-blind controlled trials, which is the gold standard. 5. I'm sorry, 5. Thank you. That's why I have him here. He's like ChatGPT. So we've had 5 trials, and 2, now I might be wrong on this too, because I've counted 255 patients thus far. And it had not gotten an FDA approval until we finally had a team that really wanted to make treatments available for core symptoms in autism. Okay, so right now, until Monday, there hadn't been any FDA-approved treatments for core symptoms in autism, things that improve language or development. The only 2 treatments we had that were approved were both antipsychotics, and both approved really for what's called irritability in autism. Okay, so we only had 2 treatments available. As a physician, I only had 2 treatments available, both antipsychotics. The first of those that was approved was risperidone. That was FDA approved after it was trialed on 180 patients and observed over 8 weeks. Folinic acid, which is vitamin B9, 255 patients, and actually treats core symptoms. Let's go back to risperidone. Risperidone, we know it causes weight gain. We know it contributes to type 2 diabetes. It also causes breast development in young men who take it. And it's worth noting that the manufacturer had been sued because they falsified data regarding gynecomastia, which is breast development. Those data were falsified because they had evidence that there was an increased risk of that, but they, after the fact, went back and removed all the kids in their data set who had gained weight and looked at those who just didn't. And in the kids who didn't gain weight, they didn't have the breast development. But the fact remains is that they did see an increased risk, and that was something that was removed originally. So as a clinician, I just want you to, I'm not looking for sympathy here, but I just want to give you, from my perspective, think about what that means to be a clinician, and you have 2 FDA-approved treatments. They're both antipsychotics, and you know that the data on one of them had been falsified. And this has only been tested on 180 patients, and how many patients do we see who've taken it not for 8 weeks, but for 8 years, okay? And I try to use a vitamin, and people will say, well, where's the science? Right? So think about that.
Very good, thank you.
And the other thing, John, I mean, it's great that you know, and you studied all that. This is really important information, but if I think the number needed to treat in the risperidone trial is something like 6, so that means you have to treat 6 patients to get 1 effect. In our trial, our first double-blind placebo-controlled trial, if you're positive for the folate autoantibody, the number needed to treat is 1.8, so more than 1 in 2.
I think the number needed to cause type 2 diabetes, though, is lower. So in fairness to risperidone, it's a joke. Because that's actually quite common. So I think we were...
So at least you get diabetes out of it.
I'll just be quite honest. I was seeing, from coming to me as referrals, I was seeing patients who had either movement disorders, severe weight gain, type 2 diabetes, and were still self-injurious and aggressive. So we took a young boy who weighed 150 pounds, who had self-injury, and we created a boy who weighs 250 and has self-injury. And what have we actually done?
Just incidentally, have you guys seen the literature on intranasal insulin reducing aggression and self-injury in kids with Down syndrome?
Yeah, I mean, it's one thing that I've been looking at recently is blood glucose regulation. So we started to realize that many of these kids that have these behavioral outbursts during the day, they're hangry, and they can't express it, and so it's easy to fix, you just give her a little risperidone, right? And so I a lot of times I will slap a blood glucose monitor if they'll keep it on. And I look at them throughout the night. I was using complex carbohydrates, but now I've been using protein-based, plant-based protein powder, which digests slowly. It also stabilizes blood glucose. Also carnitine, which we know is a treatment for autism, also stabilizes blood glucose. To the extent that if you have a diabetic, you better have them check their blood glucose if they start carnitine. So we have some really easy ways of just controlling behavior and blood glucose in some of these kids and improving their lives.
Yeah, it makes sense. I mean, the kids have gut issues, so they can't get proper nutrition. Their body's not going to say, oh, because I have a gut issue, I'm not still hangry, right? It's still an issue. So healing the gut first is what I hear. So about what percentage? I mean, we heard really good news the other day. I heard Dr. Oz say that CMS was going to give guidance to the states on how to track leucovorin and for safety and efficacy over time with real-time reporting, which was really great. I think that's really cool. But what percentage of families might benefit from this leucovorin therapy?
Yeah, so if you do the numbers, as John was saying, your folate autoantibody positive, and in our trial, 1.8, number needed to treat, which is about 55%. So if you times 55 times 75, and you get about 40% theoretically have a response, and that was in 12 weeks having a very significant improvement in language. We know a lot of kids also have a slower response, and some of them have this mitochondrial issue, which requires mitochondrial support first. That one reason not to just run in and try it, because you have to, get the body ready for it, and they may need higher doses. So in my practice, I think I see at least 70-80% children at least benefit somewhat with it. What do you think, John?
It's high. So I don't use, well, actually this is a little bit of a segue, I apologize, and we're short on time. But I don't usually use leucovorin as an isolated treatment. So we have to build a base of health, which begins with sleep, nutrition, exercise, work on stress reduction. You have to build the base and avoiding further toxins. All of these things are necessary to begin with. That's your base. Once you've kind of established those, you don't have to wait on these things. It's not like you have to go sequentially here. You can do these all together. But then you do start to think of how can I support this child both metabolically and also help reduce inflammation. And there are many ways to approach those things. So leucovorin is one step of many, but we really have to think of offering mitochondrial support. We have to think of lowering inflammation. And we have to make sure that the diet and nutrition is correct. And it's also really important to state with leucovorin that for kids who are consuming dairy products, their folate receptor antibodies are going to be higher, and they really should come off dairy if this is going to be most effective. So we can't do these things without looking at that complete picture of health.
Thank you for that. Yeah, that seems also like a rational approach. So what you're saying is that people just shouldn't like rush out and ask for leucovorin from their doctor. So we're not going to see direct-to-consumer marketing for leucovorin saying, ask your doctor if leucovorin is right for you, right? So you guys are ethical physicians. Let's give them a round of applause, please. These are ethical physicians. Back to Tracy, if you don't mind. If individuals with autism suffer from neuroinflammation and demyelination of the brain, what's the best course of action to put them back on the best neurodevelopmental track?
So when children with autism suffer with neuroinflammation or damage to the protective coating around the nerves, which is called the myelin, this could slow down speech, any type of progression or development. So what we want to do is we want to take down the inflammation, reduce the inflammation in the brain. We want to repair those wires. And so recently, and this, what we do this with is plasmalogens. So a lot of you may not know what plasmalogens are, but last year I did not know myself. And I met this amazing doctor, Dr. Dan Goodnow. And many of you may know who he is, but he created a plasmalogen supplement. And what it does is it helps deplete the white matter in the brain. And individuals with neurodegenerative disorders, ALS, Alzheimer's, MS, autism, are showing great progress with this supplement, in which I was blown away because I went to his conference and I listened to all the testimonials, and then I was caught off guard when I heard a father who was an MD speak about his daughter, who was 17 years old, and she was non-speaking. She was a non-speaking young lady with autism. And after a good amount of time of starting Dr. Goodnow's program, she started to talk. Now, I don't know about any of your other doctors, but me as a mom, typically we call it like early intervention. We got to get that speech back during early intervention. I hadn't heard about a 17-year-old regaining speech. So to me, it was pretty much unheard of. So recently, Autism Health and Dr. Goodnow Enterprises has partnered together to do a study on the benefits of plasmalogen supplements for autism in repairing the myelin in the brain, taking down the inflammation. So typically, plasmalogens are in most of our cells in our bodies, but they are mostly enriched in the cells in the heart, the brain, and the immune system. So so these plasmalogens have made a huge difference with individuals with heart issues, with immune dysfunction, which is most of these children, including myself. And so to see those testimonials and to watch the progress of what Dr. Goodnow has accomplished, we are so excited and so proud to partner with him. So what we are looking to do is we are currently raising funds, and Gina Delpaz is here representing Dr. Goodnow, and we are looking to fund this project so that we can supply those plasmalogens to families for children to be able to receive the prodrome glia. So the typical protocol for it, as he would say, is to really start off with the prodrome glia, work up to about a bottle a week, and then move over after a month or two to the prodrome neuro. So prodrome glia is it's an omega-9 supplement, and then the prodrome neuro is an omega-3. So all supporting brain function, helping to repair the myelin. So what I have seen, I'm always one who looks for other ways of treatment and healing, especially non-invasive ways. So I feel that we're really onto something with the plasmalogen supplements.
I think so. So, I've read those thousands of studies, and I constantly read about autism, and, proper myelination during neurodevelopment is really key. So if you ask the question, what, genetic mutations aside, what are the environmental factors that might impair myelination processes, myelination processes during development? It's nutritional deficiencies, environmental toxins, chronic stress, but also a lack of oxygen. Earlier today, we talked about aluminum depleting transferrin and kids turning blue after vaccination. If your kid's blue, they're not getting oxygen to their brain. Talk about a medical emergency. If the pediatric medicine, if emergency medicine can't clue into that, there is absolutely, just take their rose-colored glasses off and throw them into the street. It's crazy to think that you could look at a kid and say, no, go home if they're blue. I mean, you know that kid is suffering. But among the environmental toxins, I'm sorry, I'm cheating. I have my cheat sheet here. Triethylatin and trialkyl, I don't know what those are. I've never heard about those. But there's something that a kid can apparently run into, or a mother might. The impairments are the ones that we know, but the hypoxic ischemia demyelination seems to be a risk factor that pediatric medicine needs to learn about. So thank you for bringing like I promised, I would learn something. So thanks for.
Right, and there's more information over on the table, and anybody can go talk to Gina about it, or you can go to prodrome.com, and they are doing, I think, 50% off of all their supplements till the end of the month for families with autism.
Thank you. So Mary, I mentioned bioregulation before, but I didn't start with that question, the bioenergetics and so on. So could you tell me the 5 therapeutic approaches to bioregulatory medicine, and in particular of the bioenergetic therapy? Tell us about that one and why they're important.
Sure. The first 4 everybody's familiar with. It's the structural level, and so we would approach that maybe with chiropractics or with physical therapy. The next one down is more informational and regulatory, so that would be the cells, organs, and tissues, how drugs or vitamins or food impacts that biochemical level. The next one down is epigenetic and genetic level, which James sort of covered actually earlier. Then the next level down is the psycho-emotional, and then the last one is the bioenergetic. And so, when you think about, and I know nothing really about quantum physics, but if we drill down into the material world, past the molecules, past the atoms, past the waves and the probabilities, we really have these quantum fields. And I hope, and I think in the future, I think healing and medicine is going to go more and more in that direction. So what particularly was helpful with the bioenergetic field level of bioregulatory medicine for us is that because I was in the chemical industry and I knew that my son was very toxic, he was really constipated as an infant, and therefore his primary pathways were blocked, and he was using his ears as a secondary pathway. So he was on, like your child, on the pink stuff, like every couple months. And of course, every time I gave him an antibiotic, I'm compromising his microbiome. So we had this horrible vicious circle. So the company that really created homotoxicology was Dr. Reckeweg back in 1952. So none of this is new. This is old school stuff. There's been 1,000 studies on those remedies. So what I was particularly interested in was the extracellular matrix. And that is the mesh filled with collagen and fibrins and lymphatic vessels that support our cells and tissues and organs. So if that's dirty, then you think what's buttressing up against the cells, right? And so if the cells get dirty, then that bilipid membrane around the cell gets hard and rigid. And that means that nutrients aren't going to get in very well, and the metabolic waste that the cell produces isn't going to get out. So that is when I really felt like when he started to go after, use drainers to go after that extracellular matrix first, and then Reckeweg's company created catalysts that were complex homeopathic remedies that stimulated mitochondrial function. And that is, again, when I saw just a huge progress with my son. It was really dramatic. So he was in an ABA program in Queens, And once we started it, after a couple of months, the school called me up and they said, we're going to start transitioning him to the parochial mainstream school across the street. And so by the time he was 7, he made the full transition. And when I was talking to Dr. Kratz about this, I said, how do I know this is working? How do I know when to stop? Because I didn't have any parents to talk about this, or my father's a doctor, my grandfather's a doctor. They thought I was totally nuts. And he said, well, you know, let's see what's coming out. The hair, blood, urine, and stool are your conduits of elimination. That should be dirty. You know, your organic acids test should be just loaded, heavy metals, whatever. He goes, but the most important thing, Mary, are the cells. Because if the cells are healthy, they will divide to make tissues, then they'll make organs, and then they'll make systems. He goes, and eventually the body is going to work better. And I did that. I looked at his immune panels, CBC, metabolic profile, and sure enough, things were shifting in a positive direction, but what was coming out through those conduits of elimination, I mean, they were glowing. It was so toxic. So.
Thank you so much. So proper cellular health requires a fully functioning bilipid membrane. So who raised your hand if you had 10th grade biology at one time, or 9th grade? Ever had biology class? So remember the bilipid membrane with the poles and the squigglies in the middle? So that's not just true for people with autism, right? That's true for everybody, right?
This wasn't, Dr. Reckaway probably created HEAL back in the 50s because that's when the chemical revolution started.
Yeah, so
more man-made issues were coming up. So yeah, this was never, necessarily developed for children on the spectrum.
So who wants to talk about, on the panel, anybody, the importance of avoiding the wrong kinds of phospholipids in your diet? Who's really into that?
Yeah, I mean, phospholipids are so readily important, for making the brain's membranes, making the myelin, and the mitochondria. The mitochondria has its own cardiolipin, has its own special type of lipid that is needed for that inner membrane to work and for the mitochondria to work. So our lipids are so important. The constitution of our lipids, right, are very important. That's why we always talk about these omega-3 fatty acids, and what they do. And it's so interesting because it ends up, you are what you eat. That these fatty acids, we always think of them as fuels, but what they actually do is they get integrated into those membranes as a structural part of our body. And what happens is when you have a certain signal, the cell's kind of dumb. It just pulls out one of those fats and it breaks it down. And it ends up, if it's an omega-3, it's anti-inflammatory. If it's omega-6, it's inflammatory. And the cell doesn't know which one it is. So it's all regulated by what we put into our body and what those membranes are made of.
So it's a numbers game. So should I eat like rancid seed oils and things like that, or should I sign up for, don't sue me, a Twinkie? Right? No, I want to find the healthy phospholipids, right? And I know that there's some that are available that you can get by the jar, and you can add it to your diet, right? Do you want to say something about plasmalogens in that context?
So yes, plasmalogens are phospholipids.
That's right. Okay, great. Moving right along. So what are the, Tracy, what are the benefits of umbilical cord stem cells for autism, and are there any contraindications?
This is my favorite subject. So many years ago, we took Noah to the Ukraine under the Bradstreet protocol for stem cell therapy. My son, from vaccine injury, had lost not only his speech, but a lot of his motor skills. So here was a child who could not go across monkey bars, let alone hold onto a monkey bar, climb a rock wall, balance, tie his shoes, nothing. He was 7 years old. And within 30 days, my son regained all of that and graduated from occupational therapy. So before I get into the actual, my preferred, which is umbilical cord stem cells, I'd like to discuss why I don't prefer the other ones. And so adult, which is autologous stem cells, which are derived from either your fat or your bone marrow, which is one for a child is pretty invasive, or even an adult. But they also, cells contain memory and trauma And as you age, through oxidative stress, our stem cells start to deplete. That's why we get old. But so to me, and then also if you have a sick person and you give them back their own stem cells, so these stem cells may be more weakened, and less regenerative. So I try to kind of steer away from adult. Fetal and embryonic, there's some ethical things there as to how they're collected, and it is legal here in the United States, so I'm just going to leave that at that. Allogeneic is donor stem cells. Again, you still have the same issue with adult stem cells, that, they are adults, but from umbilical cord stem cells. And I am not just talking about the mesenchymal. I'm talking about all the stem cells in umbilical cord stem cells. So these are what we call the breath of life. So it is what God has used to create life. You have mesenchymal stem cells, which help, repair damaged tissue, take down inflammation, hematopoietic, which help build up blood cells, and then endothelial. All of these stem cells, when you use them all in conjunction, work together as like a team, like all of us here today, to create healing in the body. Now, can we guarantee where it is that those stem cells will go? We can't, because they have a beautiful mind of their own. They're going to go where they are needed most. And the number one thing is, in regards to contraindications, there are, for umbilical cord stem cells, as long as they are, properly extracted, and is what they're cryogenically frozen with. So to me, what I found in my research is that kids who have a high level of histamine reactions can have a reaction to DMSO. So the lab that I've worked with here in the United States uses trehalose, which is a naturally derived sugar, and has had 0 reactions from any stem cells. So you have to be very careful in regards to what lab that you choose, where you get them from, what are their viability testing. The lab I work with, is their viability testing is 96% or better upon administration. That's pretty high. And then when I think to myself, the first thing that parents ask me is, they're like, well, I can't afford this. And so this is the best question. And they even tell me this with diet. This is pretty sad. I'll tell you that when my son was diagnosed with autism, my husband, who fights big insurance companies, was smeared all over the front page of the LA Times, and he lost his business of 20 years. Our house went into foreclosure. I negotiated for treatments. I bartered for treatments. I sold everything I owned, and I did everything that I could to make sure that my son got every single treatment that he needed. And it didn't take money. It took determination, and it took a very clear intention. And that is why I earned the title of Warrior Mom. So
Big hand, big hand. There's no force more powerful in this world than a mother's love for their children. None. We're going to wrap up here in a little bit, but I want to go to Dr. John and Dr. Richard and say, the history of autism has this habit of cycling around to blaming the moms. Refrigerator moms, stress at home, too much screen time, you're not being disciplined enough, as if there's nothing happening prenatally and perinatally. But we also know that, healthy moms, if they can become healthy pre-conception, as healthy as possible, are more likely to have a successful, non-complicated, healthy pregnancy. So I wanted to ask you about metabolic disorder during pregnancy, its causes, how to avoid it, and what you guys know about that.
Yeah, I mean, so some of the data is kind of interesting. If you're talking about mitochondrial disorders, there's from cord blood, and from placenta, there's actually been studies, and from maternal blood, that there seems to be prenatally some fatty acid oxidation defects And they've done this also on neonatal, blood cards that they collect for other screening. They've looked at that. So that's part of the mitochondria. So it does seem like there are these metabolic disorders that are right there at birth, and they also seem to be in the mom. So how do you prevent those? And I think that that has to do with, as you say, things like stress, having a healthy diet. If you have metabolic issues before time, having the right, nutrients. One of the things that we know that happens during pregnancy is you have a carnitine depletion. And many OBs, if you ask them, they say, yeah, that's what happens. Not thinking that, well, maybe you should improve carnitine or supplement carnitine, because that's what's very important for fatty acid oxidation defects and for mitochondrial function. So, there's many things that I think
Is that from not eating enough red meat or eating too much fish or what?
Yeah, I think it's more than that. It's more than the type of, well, it probably has to do with the type of fats, one more inflammatory, one less inflammatory, that eventually gets you there. But it's not so much that you're eating the wrong thing at any particular time. It's kind of a long-term thing, how your microbiome, because your microbiome actually makes short-chain fatty acids, which then modulate your metabolism. So this is a long-term thing. Pre-conception, you should be making sure your body and your metabolism is working optimally, because we can see that, we talk about these possibly transgeneration metabolic defects. How do they happen without genes, right? But if you're born in an environment where metabolism is not optimal, then your cells are not going to develop optimally. And so we can see that we don't need the genes. We can use that environment of the fetal environment that can change things.
Can I take this in a completely different direction?
Yeah, please do.
Okay. So, let's go back to mom blaming for a second. So Leo Kanner was operating at a time post-Freudian when the whole world boiled down to psychology. So if you read Kanner's original paper, those patients he described, he went into a lot of detail, but he used the term emotionally refrigerated mothers, and he also described the fathers as bigamists. They were married more to their work than to their families. That was in an age of psychology, and we allowed psychologists to define autism. Now, the term was really based on aloneness. That's what it translates to. I've never met more caring and empathetic human beings in my life than a lot of these young adults I know with autism. They're just wonderfully connected. So the term itself is completely a false term. And it's only because in our neurotypical brain, we see somebody who doesn't make eye contact. We see someone who doesn't show me the facial expressions or the gestures that I expect, and it's my assumption that they're not connected. But the reality is they're deeply connected, right? And they're deeply caring. And so the term itself is completely false. But we've allowed psychology and that psychological model to take hold. And what we're left with is this DSM-5 criteria, which is, if you have 3 from category A and 2 from category B and 1 from category C, then you have autism. It's ridiculous. It's not a scientifically based anything. It's not based on pathophysiology. We don't diagnose anything else in the world based on that, and yet we're expected to run clinical trials on that. And think of the holdover from psychology. So we have ABA is a holdover from psychology. It's B.F. Skinner, right? Take that to an extreme, and you have, there's a school in Boston where they actually give electric shocks to kids when they don't behave well. That's an extreme, but they still have that school. So to these wonderfully empathic and caring people who simply can't communicate. I'm going to jump ahead real quick, but we've done the same mistake with the age of genetics, the church of genetics that's taken hold, because now we have papers that come out saying advanced paternal age, predisposes. Well, that is the father that Kanner described, who's a bigamist, and then you have papers too that really relate maternal anxiety to the child's autism as well, based on serotonin transporter genes, et cetera. But it's very similar. It's essentially saying the same thing. We're making the same mistake. We've repeated the same mistake again. And how many decades have gone by, and we've wasted our time on a definition that makes no sense. So I would just, I guess my only thing, and I apologize for going on with this, but one thing I would leave this with is like to say, let's get rid of the term autism. Because we have a subgroup of kids that truly have a movement disorder, a brilliant mind, trapped inside a body that just doesn't work for them. They can't coordinate the movements. I'm a neurologist, I can see that, it's obvious. Why can't my colleagues see that? And why do I have to hear somebody interviewed on TV who's, you know, really mild on the spectrum, communicates really well, does not have a movement disorder, and yet is somehow speaking for the kids that I see who are trapped inside a body that doesn't work?
Excellent, excellent. So I want to thank you, Dr. Gatanis, for bringing that up. There's two points I want to make that are related to that, and then we'll close. Mark Blaxell and Dan Olmsted did a deep dive on the original cases of autism and found that every single one of them had an environmental exposure to mercury, either through the dad's work or so on. And this is completely unknown to modern medicine. It's just buried, right? It's at the age of autism. You can go read about it there. In the Detroit area, there's this wonderful bookstore called King's downtown. Well, it's not downtown Detroit, but it's in the Detroit area. And everywhere I go in these old books, I just have a habit of going to the old medical books. Did you know I found a chapter by messing up Skinner with the Canner? Okay, so the man who coined the term autism in the age of phenomenology. And I have it in writing from him in this chapter, and I'll send you guys a copy of it, that he could find no evidence that it was genetic. Yeah. He actually, the guy who named it, said there's no evidence whatsoever in these families that it's genetic. And that's completely buried too. So I feel very fortunate to be among you guys. And, you know, I agree, let's move beyond the phenomenology. I think for tracking purposes, to see what we're doing with autism, with reducing chronic illness, improving human health, we better track it, at least diagnostically, that they would have qualified for autism and count and stay track on our counts. So I wanted to close here quick because we're going to lose the room in a minute, but if anybody has a brief final thing that they want to close with, please let me know.
I just wanted to kind of follow up on what John was saying, because it is the way that we approach these kids. And in medicine, we approach them as presumed incompetence. And this is the problem. We know now what spell to communicate and other things. These kids are in there. So that's where we have to change our view that just because they have a movement disorder does not mean that they're not a bright, empathetic individual inside there, and it's our job to get them out. And we have to move towards presumed competence, not presumed incompetence.
100%, probably the most important point made. Thank you very much, you all experts. Thank you for sharing your time. And thank you, and be sure to share this with your doctor. Share the video with any doctor from any walk of life. Thank you so much.
Thank you.